conversation, number 25. A nice round number to coincide with one of the greatest guests we could really have hoped for. My guest, if you didn't catch last week's preview, you will now find out who they are. But let me just tease for a little before I reveal the name, before they join us. My guest is a celebrated musician and someone whose voice you may even have heard on our records. So a great collaborator and a friend of the band. Before I give away too much more, I'm going to start with some news. So a news update. Firstly, today is European Folk Day, and that is a very special cause for celebration in the music world because it brings together people across borders and traditions to play music that has stood the test of time. If you tuned into last week's conversation with Bella Hardy, we had some really good reflections on what makes traditional folk music last. It somehow survives through generations and overcomes travel, aging, and changes in culture, and it continues telling the same story it always has. European Folk Day is one of the days we celebrate that particularly. Hello, everybody. Henry, Angie, got Mummy. Everyone's here. Lucy, Beth Ann, Alex. Thank you for joining. We're a little bit early, and I'll explain why in a bit. But we're just doing the news updates. So let me get back to talking about European Folk Day. If anyone did anything special to commemorate European Folk Day today, 2025, drop your adventures and recollections in the chat. I'll give you a shout out. The second piece of news for today is regarding Merlin Driver. So that is another great friend of Stornoway's and a long-time collaborator in some ways. Merlin is releasing his debut album tomorrow. So I strongly recommend that you go out and check that. Merlin is originally from Orkney, and he plays Orcadian-flavored music, a bit like Erland Cooper is another name we've encountered that you may like the sound of. So Merlin Driver is a well-traveled musician from Orkney who's studied the music of many, many different cultures, including specifically buzz music from Africa. I'm from Southern Africa. The music he studied is more East African and Central African. That's where buzz aesthetic is most powerfully practiced these days. And if you want to hear some of it, you can tune into Merlin's albums. He has also released an album going back 5 to 10 years now with the RSPB, which, as you will know, is one of Stornoway's very favorite conservation societies. The RSPB fights the cause of bird species, not just in the UK, but all over the world. And they can educate about migration and how to help with the conservation efforts for bird species everywhere. And Merlin's album, which was called Simmerdim, it sent its profits pretty much to the RSPB. So he did some sterling work there. He also gathered in one place some of the great names amongst birdwatching musicians. You need to go check out Simmerdim to go and hear what Merlin and his compatriots have to offer. But that was his first album. The second one is coming out tomorrow, and Merlin is currently on tour. So if anyone's in London tomorrow night, go to SOAS and catch him. He's also touring the RSPB birds themselves, and he's playing on site. And go check out his music. My third piece of news today, and then we will move on to our conservation conversation, because I can see my guest has joined. My third piece of news is a shout out for the Folk Album of the Year Award. This is a new initiative being organized by Folk on Foot. More about them later, but they are one of the most spectacular membership-based, subscription-based platforms for sharing folk and hiking in one place and enjoyment of the natural world. So Folk on Foot, in collaboration with Sound Roots, which you will have heard me refer to a few times, because they help organize things like the Manchester Folk Festival, which was kind of the whole reason for us starting the conservation conversations. They also help to organize the English Folk Expo, part of the Manchester Folk Festival. So they bring together folk musicians from all over the world to do magical things with music. And Sound Roots with Folk on Foot have established this Folk Album of the Year award. Because it's the first year at the moment, they're taking submissions and suggestions. And so if you know of any folk musicians who want to submit their album for voting on the Folk Award, get them to visit folkonfoot.com/award. And I will talk as well a bit more later about folk on foot, because our guest has a very touching, mesmerizing session that they recorded with folk on foot going back about 7 years now. I will be inviting our guest into the room very shortly. Thank you for your patience, everybody. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in, so that I can then flatter them as they're in the room here. It's the one and only Sam Lee. Welcome, Sam.
Hey, Ollie.
Hello. We can hear you and see you just fine, and thank you so much for giving us your Tuesday evening. And I know you're far away. Tell us a little bit about your journey today.
Oh, it's so lovely to be here, and I love the fact you've got birdsong
Yes.
whistling way behind you. Um, so I've just arrived in the Carpathian Mountains in Romania with a group of wonderful humans who I'm guiding over the next week, deep into the beech forest, the primal beech forest, in search of bison, the elusive, charismatic uh, ecosystem engineer and extraordinary rescued from the brink of extinction beast that we shall be eking out.
That's terribly exciting. I wish I could be there.
Oh,
These are the kinds of trips that maybe we can talk about how people can perhaps join you on a future one at some point. If these are the kinds of
mm,
things where people can join in. Let me do a little bit of intro and flattery here to get the crowd warmed up. And we do have quite a number of people who have joined in here, including some regulars, but also lots of faces I don't recognize from the last call. So thank you everybody for being here. Now, in case you don't know Sam, as if he needs any introduction, Sam he was Artist of the Year for Songlines magazine. This is one of the most prestigious awards in folk music internationally. That was in 2016. Since then, and for many years before then, he'd been doing incredible work fusing genres, bringing his vocal practice, is how we refer to Sam's high quality of vocal training and practice. It's more than an art form. It's more than a craft. It's something really special and unique in between there. And when you hear him singing, you'll know what I mean. You will have heard Sam on our record, The Navigator, which is one of the songs from Dig the Mountain. And the story of how we met up and discussed how to do that starts with one of Sam's Nightingale walks. If you've never been on one of Sam's Singing with Nightingale walks, I honestly and genuinely cannot recommend a more moving and fulfilling way of spending an evening. Unfortunately, they only happen in April, so you've got to wait at least another 6 months. But if you go grab tickets now for Singing with Nightingales, they are extremely special occasions, and they must be experienced at some point in one's life. Sam has also been Mercury Prize nominated. He's the author of a fantastic book called The Nightingale, which you can get as an audiobook as well, and that's hugely enjoyable, very well produced, very beautiful writing. And I'll leave it there. I know, Sam, you've been on tour a lot. You played in the Albert Hall Tons this summer. You've got loads in the diary. But most excitingly, I do want to tell people that they can come and see you next month in Manchester. And that's part of the reason why we're talking today. So some initial thoughts for you from you, and then we'll move on to our conservation questions.
Well, I think one of the highlights of this year, Ollie, is sitting around the fire at about 2 o'clock in the morning, listening to you sing folk songs after a night out with the Nightingales will always just be such, and till so late that I think the birds started singing. Um,
Thank you.
so you've made some beautiful memories for me, that and many others as well.
Well, we had your extra special guest that night was Hayden Thorpe, who I'd never encountered before at a gig. I'd listened to his music with Wild Beasts previously and his solo albums, and the involvements he's had with Robert Macfarlane, who's a big friend of the band's. And seeing Hayden, as I'm sure it would have been the case if I'd seen any other artist, but particularly with his really powerful, clear delivery, seeing these artists come into the woods with you where you've been living for a couple of weeks by that point, and sending their human music out into the Nightingales territory, and then hearing what comes back is I've said mesmerizing, I've said unique. I think spellbinding might be the next word I move on to. If anyone, you've got to go see this next April or the following. We really hope that the Nightingales will be with us for some years to come, although, as you explain in your book, it might not be very long.
Well, we wait every spring. There's that critical time around the beginning of April. We're just waiting to see how many return. I have to say, I do give the doom and gloom because their current rate of decline is terrifying, and the global heating in Africa is really destroying so much of their wintering ground. But this year, the insect population has been so helped by the warm summer that we've had that I have a feeling that we're going to have a really good kind of uplift in return because so many did well, fed well, and were able to make the big migration journey there back to Africa and then hopefully return again. So, it's as with all these situations, the graph goes up and down. But yeah, we sit and wait.
Yeah, yeah. It's something I would encourage people to go do is find out their full picture or with the ecology, the science behind it, and many of the traditional stories behind the nightingale are available in your book there, The Nightingale, which, as I say, is done in a really smart audio form as well. I wanted to ask you a bit more about European Folk Day being today, and you find yourself in one of the countries that have been taking part.
Mm,
Let me read out very briefly a comment from one of our listeners here. So Beth Ann, who runs the East Anglian Folklore Centre,
mm,
which I'll be visiting in February. Very excited to go there. They say Beth Ann says that they have a folk sing-along event at the centre on this coming Thursday, a couple of days' time, presumably to do with European Folk Day week. And I know East Anglian folk songs have played a role in some of your repertoire, Sam. Do you have much to say about so East Anglia or wider Europe?
I do. In fact, there's a lovely little kind of circular connection. So East Anglia has an incredible and very alive folk tradition, and I fell very much in love with lots of the singers and recordings, and then got to know the East Anglian Music Trust, the late John Howson and Katie, who runs that still, and I got very kind of it was part of my journey into folk music. And they used to run a traditional music day in Stowmarket at the Rural Life Museum, which brought together a lot of singers and a lot of the gypsy community and brought step dance, was really trying to invigorate the step dancing tradition and the gypsy song. And I was always have been very interested in the gypsy culture. And it was one of my favorite days. It happened in September around this time of year, and I used to go every year. But I'm gonna confess to a little secret, which is kind of really wonderful, which is that I was I was like 25, 26, 27 years old, and I used to turn up. I didn't really have anywhere to stay, and at the end of this wonderful gathering as evening, and everyone would kind of slope off into the darkness, and I just got my sleeping bag, and I would climb into the museum gypsy wagons that were there, and every year for about 5 or 6 years, I would just sleep in the gypsy wagons because it was the only place to sleep. And of course, I'd always get woken up on the Sunday morning with all the visitors to the museum coming in, and then I'd poke my head out, catch me just climbing out again. But I'm in Romania, which is obviously one of the main countries where our English gypsy communities, the diaspora, came from as part of the Roma migration from India through Eastern Europe and eventually into England. So it feels quite connected in that way.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I wonder, I'll ask Bethan whether there's going to be any particular focus of Romanian music in that folklore centre. I'd love
Mm,
to find out about that. I'd like to also move us on to our conservation conversation questions. This is the sort of tasting menu of 3 or 4 questions we'd like to ask everybody. Bella Hardy was our guest last week and had some
I saw.
fascinating things to say
Great.
about these. But just before we do that, any thoughts on what folks can expect next month if they're able to make it to Manchester to see your performance there? I think it's the 20th.
Mm. Well, I think it's Manchester Folk Festival. So I'll be there with my trio, but I'm also collaborating with an amazing duo called Spafford Campbell, Louis Campbell and Owen Spafford, who've just released an album, Real World Records, and they're coming along. We're kind of integrating songs of my own alongside Owen and Louis as well in an interesting way, and it's going to be a nice. kind of exploration of some of the songs from my album of last year, Song Dreaming, which is songs deeply connected to the natural world and my sort of love letters to the earth. So yeah, looking forward to
Brilliant.
that a lot.
That's great. And the date, I'll just correct myself there, it's the 10th of October this year. They can buy
Thank you,
tickets to
Ollie.
see you at the Halle St Peters. And yes, in collaboration with the Manchester Folk Festival, which of course is the whole reason we're here. So back in February this year, start of February, I was due with Stornoway to play at the Manchester Folk Festival the following month. And on a whim, looked at the lineup and I realized some of my all-time favorite musicians were going to be playing within a few hundred meters of us all across one weekend. And I decided, I'm not going to have a chance to meet them all in person. It's just going to be impossible to make that happen with the festival timetable. So let me see if I can call them in advance. And why don't we broadcast this call? So with the festival's help and the English Folk Expo's blessing, I got a live episode broadcast with pretty much everyone on the lineup, and we're doing it again for 2026. So this is part of the reason. I spoke to Bella last week. Bella Hardy's playing next March, and my future guests will all be taken from that lineup. But your gig is slightly earlier, coming up in just a few weeks' time. But with their blessing, as I say, we now have these questions for you. So conservation is the theme, and it's conservation firstly in the musical sense, because trad folk is in some senses about conserving. But my question to you is, what's a creative work, live or recorded, that you've experienced that you feel balances the old and the new? So balances the urge of fanning the flames of tradition and sticking to the original, but with that impulse to create something new and different.
Oh, what a tough question! That of all the folk gigs I've ever been to, and records I've listened to, it's very difficult to pinpoint this in a kind of I could say something like Martin Bennett, wonderful example of a Scottish traditional creative electronic composer taking field recordings. That's a mind-blowing, groundbreaking artist that I think really exploded the idea of what tradition is. I mean, I'm called to remind my new favorite expression, which is that tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. And there's always sort of like, well, actually, what is it? Or is tradition tending the flames, or fanning the flames, or is it worshipping the ashes? Where are things happening in ways that are, for me, inspiring? And I think the really interesting thing is that every time you see an expression of folk music happening, there is something that's being challenged there, a reimagining. It's a constant state of shedding and reimagining, and sometimes it's quite hard to see that on real time because it's slow and it's incremental. And I think that folk moves at the speed of trust and love. And I'm going to challenge the question in some ways, that we're always trying to look for what's new, what's fabulous, and actually folk music has to work at its own time in its own way and serve the community. And I've often seen where it tries to be too radical and too shapeshifty, it can almost not take root, because in the way of conservation, the rules that it has to have the collaboration of the entire ecosystem around it to sustain it. Now, sometimes something will just lodge and explode. But I do like this word conservation over preservation, and I think that's something we must really think deeply about, because preservation is the death of evolution. But conservation, in that sense, is about conserving all the states of healthiness that allow the genesis to continue.
Wonderful response, thank you. I want to reflect on something you said there about it's sort of being up to what happens organically with the genres and the musicians out there, meeting in a sort of unforced way. And the line from a Stornoway song that comes to me is "It's not up to you." Well, it's actually a Bjork song, of course. We covered her. But it's something that I mentioned because just this very week, in the past 48 hours, we've had an experience of a cross-border, cross-genre choral, specifically choral musical fusion coming together, totally out of our control. Although it's a real dream come true for us. An artist across the world
Ah,
decided to
yeah,
bring one of our songs on stage, and
incredible.
in the end, Ladysmith Black Mambazo
Ah,
of all people, who are one of the artists we've most treasured listening to, all three of us in the band, and
yes.
we could never have dreamt up something like that. Partly because of it would have been too bold a move, and we just never would have thought of it. But it's not up to us, and suddenly this strange situation has come on, and it just happens to be the case that we've been looking for a choir for one or two little projects coming up. So maybe this is what happens next. A collaboration in the near
Well
future.
done, Ollie. That's what an honor. What an honor, and totally deserved.
Thank you so much. My second question is going to be about conservation in the environmental sense, but it feels a little bit of an easy one for you because you've so connected with this Nightingale's location. You could just respond with that. But I want to perhaps draw us to other spaces that you're known to sort of occupy and attend
Mm.
and treasure, and ask you, what is a creative space, a physical place that you feel invites nature in to be part of the experience of humans creating or appreciating um, creativity? It doesn't have to be music necessarily, it might be something visual. But there's a
Mm.
conservation in that environmental sense.
Yeah. Well, I wish you'd given me these questions earlier, and I could have. I'd love to have really taken the time that these questions need, because what I find my brain doing is scanning all the
Mhm.
ecologically special places that I know of.
Well, one maybe I could give you a steer of some kind. I've loved watching that Folk on Foot session. So, in case anybody watching has not encountered Folk on Foot, it's a subscription-based platform where you can see Sam's recording, where the artists go along and make these recordings as they're doing a hike or attending some green location out there. And you can see people from Robert Macfarlane to Johnny Flynn to Bella Hardy, last week's guest, and Sam's session from 2018 is one of the best, I'd say. Does that sort of spark any memories for you, Sam?
I mean, it does. I mean, that was Nightingale territory, and I'm sort of keen not to talk about Nightingale territory because I talk about it all the time. But can I speak about where I am?
Absolutely, that's a great idea.
And I'm aware that sitting next to me is the director of the organisation that I'm with. So we're just sitting on the porch out in under the stars, which is very nice. But and in a couple of days we'll be entering into a really amazing place where the bison and it's a very interesting thing, because bison are a exceptionally rare animal. They're the largest land mammal in the northern hemisphere, and reduced down to just 12 individuals nearly 100 years ago, that have been captive bred and then since rewilded, and there's a release of 250 or so that in a herd, in herds around this area. And I think the creativity in this place, and it's less about the creativity on a musical level, but it's about the creativity of seeing where there's an opportunity, not just um, for an animal to take root and to experience that incredible impact that bison particularly have as an engineer species, the cascade of the trophics, cascade of the life that lives in the wake of their destructive impact, but also how it's instigated a whole community around to start to take pride and practice in traditional traditions of land stewardship, of agricultural practices, of music, of old crafts that have suddenly started to be given a sort of nutritious opportunity to thrive because of the project We Wilder that is here. It's funded by the WWF, and from that, music is played in the village, and people are coming from all around the world to experience a place that is still seeing um, agricultural practices that go back to the Middle Ages, of pastoralism, and what happens when this kind of old way, this slow way is practiced, is an abundance and a biodiversity and the sound of the land here is deeply inspirational. And the reason why I bring it up is because the thing that I always come sense when I come back from places like this, but particularly here, is how thin the vibration of a lot of our country is in its depletion, in its lowered baseline of how much birdsong there is, how much insect life there is, and actually how creative I feel and enlivened by places like this that have been well maintained by humans, by human gardeners, as well as big hairy bison.
Thank you. That's brilliant. And it's a stimulating place for your creativity as well and your musical sense.
Yeah, and song feels so at home. And there's lots of song that we do when we're out on the trail and the time sitting around the campfire, and for all of us, the way ideas and contemplation, poetry flows, they're not just, us being, you know, uh, ecological sort of scientists looking at evidence of life. It's really about listening to our hearts as we're there as a group of creatives. There's a lot of creatives and writers that are here with us in this group who feel that sense of release when nature is it's like the difference between a Nescafe sort of instant coffee and a really, really, artisanal cup of the good stuff, and everyone just feels really it's activating.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Mm.
that really is the word, right? I studied chemistry a long time ago, and when atoms get excited, another way to talk about that is they get activated to a higher level of energy, and they vibrate at a different frequency with a sort of an increment of energy. They become a different sort of being temporarily. If only we could keep that activated state forever. I think that's
Mm.
the ultimate aim of life, isn't it? Beth Ann says it sounds incredible, Sam, and she's impressed by this description. And I'm sure if there's any way folks can join these expeditions in future, we'd love to share that with the audience, maybe after. And Hilltop Farm Girl says, lovely to see Sam here,
Yay,
one of our favourite
Leslie!
guests. We've
Best
got
farm in Britain.
excellent. And just a reminder that also from the crowd that it's 10th of October is your show coming up at St Peter Halle in Manchester. So I think that's those are my questions really. And is there anything else you'd like us to close on in reflection, Sam?
Oh, Ollie, when's the next Stornoway album coming out?
Oh, great question. I know we each usually have our different projects on the go, and yeah, Stornoway is certainly making noises. Today we announced something exclusively to our fan club, and if anyone missed out on that, it must be because you're not in the fan club. So get in touch, and I'll let you know how to join it. But rumblings of new material at some point. Thank you for asking about that. And it was so lovely to be able to have you on our last record, Sam. And
Such a
we
good
must do that
record,
again at some
Ollie.
point.
Yeah, I will say that Excelsius, the song, the kind of requiem for the ash tree, just for me, I mean, that's it. In some ways, it's where music, the tuning in to the lament for a tree in dire straits right now, and how that spurred such an exquisite song. The whole album is wonderful, but I always kind of treasure getting to the end of the record to listen to that, and it really does. I feel more in love with with ash trees for that song. So if music can ever say it serves a purpose,
Thank you.
there's proof.
Thank you. Yeah, and it might have worked some magic because as we hear, ashes are now demonstrating a
Yeah.
little bit of a resistance and a comeback against that
Mm.
dieback. So um, Yeah, I'll mention one more thing about woods and trees at the moment. One of the books that's really inspiring me personally is this one called "The Wood That Built London." It mentions all these species, but most importantly, I want to mention it now because it does a bit of what you do, Sam, on the Nightingales nights. You talk about coppicing and the ancient commercial practices that humans engaged in when they were first exploring as the ice thawed many thousands of years ago, and coppicing, appreciating woodlands and different landscapes led to the Great North Wood, which was one of London's biodiversity treasures.
Mm.
It's now sadly almost entirely depleted and fragmented, but learning all about it and certainly channeling the memories of the Nightingale nights and a lot of your music as I'm going through that book and learning.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for being our guest today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks,
And
Ollie.
I want to give it one more plug. The 10th of October, everyone head up to Manchester to see Sam as part of the Manchester Folk Festival celebrations. And happy European Folk Day.
Indeed. And equinox too.
Absolutely. Well, I'm wishing you safe travels and say hi to the bison for us. And
I will do. I'll get here next year, Ollie.
yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank
See
you,
Sam.
everyone. Thank you, Ollie. See you soon.
Bye. Take care. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you again next Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Ideally, and catch up on the recordings if you missed the start of this because we were a little bit early. But those recordings will soon be made available only to the Stornoway fan club, which I mentioned. So if you missed out on this morning's news regarding a very special reissue record we're doing, then that'll be because you're not in the fan club. So please do join it, as well as in order to catch up the recordings of these conservation conversations. Hope you enjoyed Sam Lee tonight, the one and only, and one of my favorite guests so far. And next week we'll see who we've got in store. Thanks for giving us your Tuesday evening, and take care.